Okay. The next item, members, the minutes of the previous meeting. So to ask members to confirm that they're happy with the minutes of the previous meeting, I just want to comment on the minutes of the previous meeting that they actually weren't shown to the full council on the last council meeting. There wasn't time to do that. So they'll be shown to the full council at a future meeting. So moving on from that, have there been any declarations of interest, Leila?
None received, Chair.
Any questions from members of the public?
No questions received.
Any questions from members of the council?
No questions received.
Thank you. Right, moving on now to the items that we have to discuss. The first item is the polling district and polling review for 2023. And if I can ask Chairley Gibb, Electoral Services Manager, to introduce this item in this report.
Thank you, Chair. So this polling district and polling place report is put into the committee following a compulsory review which needed to be run between the 1st of October this year and the 31st of January 2025. We commenced the review on the 2nd of October this year, and the public consultation started at the same time and concluded on the 14th of November. As part of the consultation, we received 7 responses online and 113 responses to a survey that was sent out to electors in Farnham North West 2, which was identified as an area that we needed to pay special attention to. During the review, there were no proposals to amend the polling districts, and that's reflected in the report. 3 polling places have been identified for change. So Farnham North West 2, which was currently the Folly Hill Infant School, and we contacted electors in the area, inviting them to respond via an online survey. The results were quite mixed between moving it to the Hale Village Institute and keeping it at the Folly Hill Infant School. The second area was Holloway, which is currently the Sports Pavilion, but this is now a coffee shop and it's no longer suitable to use as a polling station. So the recommendation is to change that to the St John the Baptist Church. And finally, Farncombe, the polling station in Farncombe, which is currently at the Broadwater Youth Centre, and the recommendation is to change it to the St John the Evangelist Church. So the committee's therefore recommended to, the committee is asked to recommend that the polling place for Farnham North West 2 is designated as either the Folly Hill Infant School or the Hale Village Institute Hall. And upon doing so, the full council approves the proposed polling districts and polling places as set out in Appendix 1 of the report, including the polling place for Farnham North West 2.
Thank you, Chair. I think we have one speaker on this item, Councillor David Beeman. So, David, you have 4 minutes to speak on this item.
I hope I'll take less than 4 minutes, Chair, hopefully. But yes, this is I am one of the 2 representatives of Farnham North West on both Waverley Borough and Farnham Town Councils, and the decision of which location to use as a polling station in Farnham North West 2 is a finely balanced judgment. I personally favour the use of Hale Village Hall rather than Folly Hill Infant School from the start, actually, to make it quite clear. But let me just list what I believe are the disadvantages of continuing to use Folly Hill Infant School. There's steep access to the school entrance, which many people found difficult to negotiate, particularly those who were less mobile. There's limited car parking, but perhaps the most pertinent point is that the school has to close for the day and that parents have to make alternative arrangements for care of their children who are in the age range of 5 to 7. It's not as if you could leave them at home unsupervised. Now, of course, there are also some disadvantages of Hale Village Hall. Most people would have to travel further since it's located outside the ward, but the maximum distance is in fact no more than a mile for anybody. It has better car parking facilities, and in fact, neither has a good public transport service, but neither does the Surrey Connect DDRT service. Of course, they could use that facility if they so wished. In my book, the deciding factor is the fact that if we choose Hale Village Hall, there's no need to close the school for the day and create all the consternation and anxiety that causes. I've spoken with my colleague, Councillor Graham White, who also represents Farnham North West on Waverley and Farnham Town Councils, East Kirkby Way, and he's in agreement with what I suggest. I would prefer Hale Village Hall. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Well, members, there's, as I understand it, and Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, our duty is to make a recommendation to the full council on the officer's report, but we're actually asked to make one decision to recommend the item that David's been talking about, the Northwest Farnham 2 polling station. It can either be the Follyhill Institute or the Follyhill Infant School or the Hale Institute. So if I can first of all ask members if they have any concerns about anything other than that decision, having reviewed all the other polling stations that the officers have recommended, are members content with the officers' recommendations? Or does anyone have any items they would like to discuss? Councillor Rubini.
Thank you, Chair. I know I hide beside you, sorry. My only question is one I asked a little while ago. Is public transport available there? Because I do get concerned that one of the first elections may well be for the Police and Crime Commissioner. And if that's held on its own normally, then we get a very low turnout of about 15% or lower. So I wouldn't want any obstructions in the way. So does anybody know if there's good public transport to that particular place?
Are you talking about the Hale Institute?
Yes, sorry, yeah.
Are you talking about that one? Okay, that's fine. So we can address that item. But before we get into that, can I ask if anyone wants to speak about any of the other polling stations? I think you wanted to speak, yeah?
Thank you, yes. I don't really know this area very well, but I do absolutely agree that there should be a principle actually about not closing schools. I think it wreaks havoc on kids' education. And I mean, maybe some kids don't really mind having a day off. I mean, I know I didn't, but it's for some children, it's actually quite damaging. So I think, you know, there should be a presumption about not using schools. Do you want me to talk about Farncombe yet or not?
Yeah, talk
okay.
about any
All
other
right.
one other than.
But obviously, so regarding Farncombe, I'm a bit torn over that because I know that the proposal is very central. And so from many points of view, that's a really good idea. But I do have a concern about what could be a bit of a melee of cars. That there's really basically not very well, there isn't really any parking there. And I think it could even get quite crowded and busy and even potentially a bit hazardous.
Do you have any alternative suggestions?
Well, why we're moving from Broadwater Youth Centre? I wasn't quite sure what the reason was.
I think we ought to put that one back to Shirley.
So it was due to the location being more central for electors.
Okay.
And after an assessment of the church, it was a very good venue in terms of size and everything else. Parking isn't ideal, but speaking to members of the church, they said that there is on-street parking and we could potentially get some extra parking reserved for us on polling day.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I do take that point. It is more central and, you know, but I think people who live up Summers Road will definitely be driving, I should think, to the church. But then, of course, people in Farncombe would also have been driving to the youth centre. You can't really win either way. It's just that at the youth centre, there is better parking, so it does become less of a scrum. But I do take the point that it is more central, because it is more central in St John Street. But I just think we need to be mindful of the parking. And I think if there's anything that can be done to improve the parking on the day, that would be quite a good mitigator.
Thank you for that. So are you content to go along with the officer's recommendation, subject to them looking into the parking issue? Thank you. Any comments from anybody on any other polling station, and then we'll discuss fully the Northwest Farnham 2 one. So looks as if everybody's content about the other polling stations. On the Northwest Farnham 2 one, my own view, if I can just say, is that we should, I would be inclined to accept the view best of the local members, and David Beeman, and speaking also on behalf of Graham White, they are in favour of the Hale Institute one. Secondly, if you look at the public responses, actually, which is in the officer's report, they come out pretty strongly in favour of the Hale Institute as well. And one of the big issues is the one that you spoke to a minute ago, the effect on children of closing a school for the day. And that's happened an awful lot recently in terms of for other reasons, children's education. So I personally would favour the Hale Institute. But if any councillors wish to comment, most of you aren't Farnham councillors, but we're particularly interested if Councillor Ward had any comments to make as a Farnham councillor. He will know the area better than most.
It seems a perfectly sensible suggestion to me, Chairman.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ward. So, Councillor Nicholson, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, when I was reading this, I was inclined to go for the Hale Village Institute Hall. All the information tended to push it that way. But after hearing from Councillor Beeman, that has confirmed my view that is the correct way to go. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So is there anyone disagrees with what Councillor Beeman is recommending as a local member? And in fact, the public appear to recommend as well that we should recommend the Hale Institute. So that will have to go alongside the officer's report to the full council. I think that will happen on the 12th of December, if I'm correct. There's a council meeting on the 12th of December. So the report from the officers supplemented by a recommendation from this committee that we favour the Hale Institute. Will be recommending that to the full council. I think that concludes that item. So, Chair, if we can move on to item 7, the temporary designation of polling places in Cranborough East, Godalming, Binscombe and Charterhouse. If you can introduce that item, please, Julie.
So this report recommends the temporary designation of polling places in Cranley East and Godalming, Binscombe and Charterhouse because they're unavailable for use in May 2024 in Cranley East due to another booking, and for Godalming, Binscombe and Charterhouse it's expected to be for most of 2024. We don't know when the usual venues will be available again due to renovations in those areas. Officers have investigated other options within the polling districts and for Charterhouse outside the polling district, and the options recommended in this report were deemed to be the most suitable venues in those areas. This would be only for a temporary measure, and they will be reverted back once the usual venues are available again to the normal venue. So
I think the leader would like to say something.
Thank you for your exercising your discretion, Mr. Chairman, because I know I didn't actually register to speak on this item. I did just want to reflect on the Charterhouse ward suggestion there. Just going back to Councillor Crow's comments regarding the parking, which I absolutely do agree with, and I think will be a concern at Farncombe. That will be more of a concern when you're also allocating Charterhouse's ward allocation to it for 2024. So I would have that concern about parking with it just being for Farncombe and Catchall ward. If you're adding Charterhouse and Binscombe, and for the borough level, it's Charterhouse and Binscombe, but I assume you're talking about the general election here. That will be a bit of I think you're gonna have some serious parking issues at that church if you're asking 1.5 wards to use it. I don't know what other parking is available either. I mean, the co-op is the only other large section. I mean, the street is not going to be empty as even if you allocate parking. We've seen issues with parking there before for other events, that's all, and they were probably smaller in turnout than a general election. So I would raise that concern if you're conflating the two wards.
Thank you for that, Paul. Can I ask Sheila to comment that? Sheila, can you just make it clear the temporary designation is principally aimed at the police commissioner election next May. Will it still apply at the general election, depending when the general election occurs?
yes, so the general election must be held before January 2025. Yeah. So for both Binscombe and Charterhouse, we're not expecting to be able to use the normal venues for the next general election because we're expecting the usual venues to be out of use for the whole of 2024 unless the general election has held in January, and then we might be able to use the normal venue. Regarding the Charterhouse venue, on page 51, it sets out the alternatives that we investigated in the area, and we haven't been able to find any other alternative that would be more suitable. Yeah, they're either not available for us to use, they're not accessible, or they've yeah, this is not a good size room for the needs of the polling station. So the parking arrangements around there is a concern. There is a Waverley car park on the other side of the train station that we may be able to look into suspending charges and allowing electors to vote to park in there. But we are quite constrained with this area because we haven't been able to find an alternative. It is outside of the borough ward. Due to the polls that we have next year, the PCC is voted on for the whole of Surrey, so we aren't counting in borough wards, and the general election, they're within the same constituency going forward. So it wouldn't be an issue in terms of not being in the same ward for those polls. For any by-elections in the area or anything, we would look at alternatives and see if there was another venue available, especially if it was for a borough ward election. So yeah, I think having reviewed the alternatives available, that is the best solution that we've been able to come across, especially because both Binscombe is also unavailable. So it's being moved, what's been proposed to be moved to the Waverley Family Centre that is almost the opposite end of Binscombe. So it wouldn't be, that would, when we evaluated it, we looked into sending the electors for Charterhouse to the Waverley Family Centre, and it's quite a long distance to go to. So we thought that the church would be a more suitable alternative. In terms of moving Farncombe polling station, what we found in previous elections, if we designated it only for a temporary polling station for electors from Charterhouse, the electors in Farncombe that live nearby may be quite confused because they're having to walk past a polling station to go to another polling station that's already in their area. And it's, when that has happened previously, it's led to lots of confusion. Just on polling day, people going to the wrong polling station. So that's why we've come to the conclusion that that's the best venue. But we do understand it's not ideal, but we haven't been able to find anything else more suitable.
Thanks, Chair. I doubt if parking will be a problem for the police commissioner election, because you get such an abysmal turnout. But if the police commission election and the general election happen to be held on the same day, which is not impossible, the government might decide to call it in May. That would, I don't know if that would add very much to the problem, because the general election is clearly the problem where you get a big turnout actually. But have you any alternative suggestion, Paul?
First of all, Mr. Chairman, I entirely agree with you in that the day centre's regular visitors are likely to outnumber voters for just the police and crime commissioner election. So we're probably fine on that front. I mean, the only thing I would throw into the mix is that if we know for sure that we are going to have two wards meeting, then surely, despite the fact that it is further away, the Broadwater original one would probably be better for just this year because it has more parking, with then the move away from that the following year when you have the other venues available and you're not conflating two wards. Other than that, I agree with you. I don't think there are alternatives. I just think you will have to put in some form of marshal, particularly on, I know it's more difficult post-COVID to say the busy periods because it's less predictable, but we see issues with parking there during regular days with nothing particular going on at the church. So, I mean, I would expect there to be some issues, and I would probably flag it with the police as well that morning, because we've seen some very silly parking on the road there when people can't park in the church. Do we know for sure that the church itself won't be doing anything? The day centre, is it going to be operating that day? Because it does have users as well that take up most of their car parking when it's in use. So I mean, if you've got a full car park with day centre users from, I don't know, 9 through till about midday, quite a lot of voters are going to struggle to get there by car, particularly the Charterhouse voters who are almost certainly going to drive to it. Anyway, I'm struggling because I haven't got an alternative, but bearing in mind we're only moving from Broadwater because of a choice, it would feel like the wrong time to make that choice.
Okay. Yes, I agree. If we don't absolutely have to move from Broadwater for this one, it just seems more sensible to stay put just for now, if that's at all possible, for the reasons that Councillor Follows has suggested, because it really is a nightmare at you know, at the church, and the day centre will be operating. I mean, we don't want to say to the day centre people, well, don't come in that day because there's an election. I mean, some people really need the, you know, they need to stick with their programme.
You want to respond to that, Julie?
I think when we looked at the Broadwater Youth Centre, because it's on the outskirts, again, of the almost the opposite end for the Charterhouse voters to go to, we weighed up the distance they would have to go. And initially we thought, well, would we be able to have the Charterhouse electors going to the church and the Farncombe voters going to the youth centre? Because a lot of the Farncombe voters are concentrated around the church, we were concerned about the confusion. So it's definitely an option. And I suppose it's for the committee to decide which is the best way forwards, because as officers, we thought that the better option would be to go with the church and have them both at the church. And they've got two very good sized rooms that we could have the polling stations in separate rooms. The church have confirmed that we could have use of the whole church, so there wouldn't be anything else going on in the church on that day. But it is yeah, the parking isn't ideal.
I don't think many of us in the committee are in the right position to decide, Chair. I think it's really up to the local members to say what they think, actually. The members who actually know the local situation. Whether you're willing to go along with the officer's report, but you think it needs to be reconsidered. Because I would support whatever the local members say.
I don't like not going along with officers' reports because they've done a lot of, you know, assessment and toing and froing on this sort of thing. But there's no doubt that if it's going to be at the church, there is absolutely going to have to be a real commitment to something to do with the road traffic management and the parking management. So that will be various things, marshals, and also the police need to get involved, because it really will cause a problem there for sure. On the day, not on the BCC elections, as we've all agreed.
Yeah, I'm not a local member, but I know the area very well from previous employment, etc. Parking is a huge problem there. Yes, it is well used at all hours of the day. I think the officer made a sensible suggestion, if we can, to take the parking into North Street car park. I think that's what it's called, North Street car park, which can accommodate probably about 40 odd cars. So if we could take control of that, then I think that would ease the conditions.
I think that would be very, very helpful if we can for sure at least have North Street car park and maybe even Farncombe station, because I mean, it's not massively used these days. So it might be that we can come to a deal as well. But certainly North Street car park would be very, very helpful. And at least that would then mean that people who need to be closer can have the nearer by car parking spaces, of which there are about 10 or 5.
Would you be happy with that, Shelley? That we probably have to alter the report to say a little bit about the marshalling that needed and so on and so forth, and the use of the Waverley car park.
Yes, and it's definitely something that we've looked into, and yeah, have proposed that the Waverley car park would be used, and charges would be suspended for the day. I just wondered, Chair, if it would be appropriate to recommend that the returning offer, if a better alternative is found, that they would have the option to move the polling station to another venue in consultation with the ward members, so that we would be able to continue to investigate, and if something a better alternative is proposed, that would be used instead.
a deadline in this, Mark, that we have to actually decide by a certain date, because the full council has to decide on the 12th of December, as I understand it.
Well, that would be helpful. And you asked earlier, is there an obligation upon this committee to make a recommendation? The answer is no. You can make a recommendation in accordance with what's being proposed. You can make an alternative one. You can make no recommendation at all. There are some detailed reasons set out in the report why these venues are being proposed, and I emphasise that it's not this committee that makes the final decision. That's reserved to full council. It's just a matter for this committee, if it chooses, to make certain recommendations to council for full debate and then decision. So hopefully that helps you in terms of the context. Clearly there will be some consequences which the officer can expand upon if these polling places are not settled in advance of forthcoming elections. And so, yeah, it's a matter for this committee as to how they want to proceed and what recommendations they wish to make. But the intention is that there is a recommendation, if at all possible, made this evening for consideration by full council.
Yes, I thank you for that. I think we should make a recommendation if we can, actually. As I understand it, actually, once it gets within 6 months of an election, it then becomes the problem with the returning officer. The returning officer is left to decide. So if the full council doesn't decide by the 12th of December, we might get within we'd certainly be within 6 months of the PCC election, I think, if I'm not careful.
Yes, so in our constitution, if the venue is, we're aware the venue is not available within 6 months of an election, it's delegated to the returning officer, and they would designate somewhere in consultation with the ward members.
So do we feel we are in a position to make a recommendation? Are we supporting the officer's report, their recommendation, with the proviso that we'd like to see some additions in terms of marshalling and the use of the Waverley car park? Is that the view? Is that the consensus view, particularly of the local members?
And maybe including Station Road car park as well. Whatever car parks you can get your hands on, really, locally.
Would you be happy for that, the Chair, to go forward, the recommendation to the full council? Does it mean an adjustment to your report?
Well, Chair, it may well mean a change to the recommendation. Yeah. So I think perhaps we'll start with the original motion as is on the order paper being proposed and seconded, and then if members are minded to change that, then we can deal with an amendment, and then we may end up with an alternative recommendation to full council if that's what members are minded to do.
The recommendation is in the papers, in the public papers, isn't it? In the papers of the full council. Are you saying, perhaps you could advise us exactly what we should do here?
Well, in the report, the recommendation, just to be absolutely clear, is that this committee recommends to full council for decision that it approve a temporary designation of polling stations until the other venues are available as follows. And then you've got A, B, C, and the suggested temporary venues are set out therein. I'm sensing that members may not be entirely happy with that, in which case you may want to propose alternatives and then take a vote on that. Or alternatively, after further debate, perhaps you want to go with this recommendation. It's entirely a matter for this committee. Does that help?
That does help. So I think the first point is we do wish to go with the officer's recommendations, basically, yeah. But we just want to say that within one of the polling stations in particular, we want to ensure that it's done in a certain way in terms of the use of the Waverley car parks and additional marshalling. Would that satisfy the two local members, Councillor Fallers and Councillor Long? Would that be okay?
It would satisfy me, absolutely.
And
Yeah, no, I would be satisfied with that if we can. So I don't think it needs a full amendment. I'm not quite sure of the rules myself, but certainly it's subject. So I'm very happy to go with that, plus adequate parking arrangements.
I think it depends how strongly you feel about this. Ultimately, it's down to the returning officer to make these arrangements, and there will be a lot of discourse with him or her between now and then. So it depends how strongly you feel as to whether or not you want to formulate that in the form of an actual motion.
Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, I'm not a member of this committee. My suggestion would be that you do amend the recommendation to specify that you would like officers to investigate the use of the Waverley car park and investigate the use of the National Rail owned, Network Rail owned car park over the road. Waverley can obviously agree to do it for its own car park, and I think we probably should. So my suggestion would be, so that this is not left to the returning officer in the absence of council input, that we make a formal request as part of that. But obviously that is again for the committee to determine.
Members of the committee be happy to go along with that suggestion?
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. Well, let's record that, Leila, as the committee's decision that we're supporting the officer's recommendation, but we wish to see the things that the Councillor Follows has said adopted as well. It's recorded in it's a recorded meeting, so it's recorded in the. Do we need to vote on this? Actually, is it necessary for us to vote on? Because we're all agreed, I think. Okay.
I can do you want me to propose that?
Yeah, if you'd like to
yes,
propose.
well,
it,
I
yeah.
do propose that we that we accept the hard work and recommendation that has been made here, and I'm talking specifically about the Farncombe issue, and contingent upon parking arrangements being sought beforehand.
Okay. Is anyone willing to second that? Councillor Bin has seconded it. And are we all agreed to that?
Agreed.
We're all agreed. Okay, I think we've got there. and in time for Councillor Brubini to leave for his for his meeting.
I didn't engineer it, I assure you.
I just want to say something finally. Actually, it's not specifically on the agenda, but there is a meeting, first meeting tomorrow evening here of the joint group consultation group between ourselves and Guildford Borough Council. Some members of this committee are on that, and Council Follows on it as well. So some of us will be meeting here tomorrow. I think that meeting is going to be recorded. It's not going to be a public meeting, but it will be recorded. So if any members of this committee will see the minutes of that working group, and the recording will also be made available to members of this committee if they want to see it. So I thought I'd let people know about that. So I think that concludes the meeting. So thank you everybody for your attendance. And we're now closing the meeting. Thank you.
Chairman?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. You did get away in time.
I did get it right.